There they lie, just off the city centre, shaped by nature, landscaped by men. This is Bukit Brown Cemetery. At rest are the country's forefathers, whose collective timelines span 150 years of our development into modern Singapore. Their tombstones are touchstones in living memory for a new generation of descendants. This is our history from the hills. When Bukit Brown first opened in January 1922 to the public, the Chinese were faced with the prospect of standard prescribed plots for burial, which hampered geomancy practices or fengshui. In its first year, there were only 93 burials, but the Chinese gradually adapted to and accepted the constraints of space and location. By the 1940s, in fact, all available plots had been bought up. But demand for plots never waned, so much so that illegal swapping led to a lucrative black market. By the time it closed to burials some 50 years later, Bukit Brown had some 100,000 graves. Where and how some future generations will pay their respects to ancestors is set to change. By 2016, a new 8-lane highway is expected to cut through Bukit Brown. At stake are some 3,764 graves, which will have to be exhumed before construction begins. The remains of this tomb, stake number 2269, is already no more. Lien Bun Pang was exhumed in December 2012 by his grandson, Michael Lien.
Today we have exhumation of my grandfather, and thereafter the remains will be brought over to Choa Chu Kang for cremation.
Exhumation takes place under the cover of darkness, because the belief is that the dead, being yin energy, must be sheltered from the sun, which is yang energy. It is the duty of the descendant to witness the removal of the remains.
I remember he was a very old man, not very sick, he can walk about, but then one day he just passed away, where he was sitting on a toilet bowl. That's what I remember as a child. That was during the Japanese time.
Located further up the hill is Michael's stepmother, Tan Ah Kam, who died young. She was his father's first wife from China, who was sickly when she arrived. Her grave is not affected by the highway, but Michael saw an opportunity to reunite members of the family and decided also to exhume her remains. These days, descendants looking to reunite with their ancestors are turning more and more to cemetery guide Raymond Goh.
I first got involved in Bukit Brown when I joined one of my brother's tour as to lead people to visit some what we call the lost heritage of Singapore, and Bukit Brown is one of the stops. So beginning on 2006, I do get sporadic requests to find, but when the government announced about the road plans, more people came forward. In fact, I get about a few hundred requests already. So throughout these few years.
In December 2011, he found a cluster of 9 tombs belonging to the Tan Kui Lan family, which had been reburied in Bukit Brown in 1941 after being exhumed from the Tiong Bahru Cemetery. Tan Kui Lan, who passed away in May 1904, was a prominent member of the Straits Chinese settlement community, and Tan Kui Lan Street, off Beach Road, was named after him. For Raymond, finding the Tan Kui Lan cluster at Hill or Block 4 was the result of serendipity.
When I was hiding under the tree from the rain, my eyes happened to glance around, and there I saw a cluster of old tombs. 1 month ago, I had found a Tan Kui Lan wife tomb. So I recognized straight away the ancestral village where Tan Kui Lan came from. And because of this ancestral village, I went out closer to find, and that is where I found there's an English inscription, Tam Jim Lei, which is the grandson of Tan Kui Lan. And so I immediately suspect that I have found the Tan Kui Lan cluster there.
On further inspection, buried with Tan Kui Lan was not grandson Jim Lei, but Jim Seng. Tan Jim Seng is Serene Tan's grandfather, who died when Serene's father was just an infant. Serene's search for her roots arose from a dream she had in the late 90s.
I saw this man, he was quite big, And then he was wearing those Mandarin type of clothes. Then he was seated right in front of me. He wrote something on a piece of paper. He pushed it to me. And I read it. It says, "Why nobody visit?" I was, a bit puzzled why he's asking me about this. But when I woke up, I realized that I remember my mother or my father also told me before that my ancestors were very big people. So I remembered his face. So one time during Chinese New Year, I went over to visit my auntie. I asked her whether she has any photographs of our ancestors. So she brought out a book. And before she could tell me anything, I pointed to the person in the photo. I asked, "Is this our ancestor?" And she said, "Yeah, that one is your great-grandfather." I said, "Yes, he's the one who came to me in a dream." So with that, I came over to Bukit Brown to look for his grave.
Serene had never been to the grave before, and the only clue she had was a picture of her late father at the tomb of Tan Chu Kim, Tan Kui Lan's elder son. Tan Chu Kim was one of the founding members of the Straits Chinese Recreation Club. In the late 1880s, it was the first club to offer traditional English recreational sports such as cricket and lawn tennis to the Chinese.
With the closure to burials since 1973, Bukit Brown has since become an important green lung in Singapore's ecosystem. Home to various monkeys, snakes, monitor lizards, and pangolins, the hills operate like a natural sponge in absorbing water after heavy rainfall, lowering risk of floods in low-lying areas.
It was a dream which led Serene Tan, great-great-granddaughter of Tan Kui Lan, to start researching her family roots, and that led her to Raymond Goh.
I happened to stumble upon this website by Raymond Goh from API about the discovery of Mrs. Tan Kui Lan's grave. So she's buried alone over at Bukit Timah, so I went over to have a look at the graves. But meanwhile, I contacted Raymond and to ask him if he's able to find Tan Kui Lan's grave, because since he's found the wife's grave. So about 2 weeks later, I received an email from him that he has accidentally found this cluster during the rain while he was sheltering from the rain. So I was very happy. I came back to meet him and then to have a look at the graves.
For Serene, serendipity also led to the meeting of a cousin she never knew she had at Bukit Brown in March 2012. LT Tan from Malaysia, whose grandfather is Tan Jim Lay, had also contacted Raymond to look for his ancestors. Both are the great-grandchildren of Tan Chu Kim, Tan Kui Lan's eldest son. Today, Serene and LT have cleared their great-grandfather's and mother's tombs in Hill 3 and are now jointly working to renovate the family cluster over at Hill 4.
Then the walkway, he said he'll do cement. Okay, walkway.
Not cement. I'm thinking of those kind of walkway, the kind of stone,
What type of stone?
You can walk on it, one. Kind of slab, square slab, all over.
I can tell him. LT is financing the restoration, and then I'm the one who I will come every now and then to check the work. And then we sort of like sit down to think of what to design for the graves.
Yeah, after all, my ancestors.
Without them, there's no us.
The tombstones serve as a tangible reminder of their ancestry, which spans over 150 years. This reminder is not lost on a group that visits these grounds regularly. Since the beginning of 2012, a group of volunteers calling themselves Brownies have been regularly conducting public tours every weekend.
When I first started All Things Bukit Brown, the idea was to raise awareness of the treasure that is Bukit Brown, and which is why I then coined the slogan Heritage, Habitat and History. And the whole idea is to describe Bukit Brown as more than a cemetery, and also to take the load off Raymond Goh, because his expertise was needed to search for tombs for the descendants. And so I thought that perhaps he could train a handful of volunteers and then we take on the tours instead.
Relieved from conducting tours, Raymond now has more time to answer the growing numbers of requests from descendants. Among those who sought his help were brothers Anthony and Alphonsus Seng, whose great-great-grandfather, Chia Ang Siang, had a hill named after him. Chia Ang Siang was a pioneer and wealthy landowner. he worked for the British trading company Bousted for over 40 years in the late 1800s. According to Song On Xiang's book on 100 Years History of the Chinese in Singapore, he donated land to the Hokkien Huiguan and was himself buried in his own private plot.
Buying property is one of his investments. He actually owns, from what we gather from our research, he actually owns a lot of property.
Anthony and Alphonsus may be more familiar with Chiang Xiang's history now, but that was not the case until recently.
You know, all these years, my mom used to tell us when she was a little girl, she has gone to the cemetery with her mother, and she remembered visiting some important relative there. And the name Chia Anxia came up. So to be honest with you, before that we didn't know much about Chia Anxia, and my mother didn't tell us much about Chia Anxia at all. And then I went into Google's, and it was amazing that there was so much information about him. And then in the days that followed, I contacted the library, I contacted the National Archive, and they gave us so much information. And then I started to, have a lot of names, and then I started to fill in the blanks, in the family trees.
Little did brothers Anthony and Alphonsus suspect that their quest into their lineage would lead to one of the most significant tomb finds of the year.
Bukit Brown is a sanctuary to 84 species of birds, making up 23% of all bird species found in Singapore. Unusual spottings of these fine-feathered species include the blue-crowned hanging parrot, the changeable hawk eagle, the thick-billed pigeon, and also the black-headed bulbul.
In September of 2012, Raymond Goh, along with brother Charles, found Chiang Xiang's tomb on a standalone hill near Kopi Swa, lost for well over 50 years. Bukit Brown volunteers organized a visit for the descendants to make the trip to the tomb.
On that day, there were 5 of us. Actually, many couldn't make it. We understand that the terrain was tough. So the auntie and uncle, we didn't dare to take the risk. In fact, we wanted to bring our mother there, but then we decided not to.
Despite the challenging conditions, the group of 5, with members of the media in tow, made the trek.
Thank you. I like this angle. So how did you know this is Anxiang? Because the name of the sun.
The visit could not have come at a better time. It was the eve of Chiang Xiang's 120th death anniversary. The event was made even sweeter for brothers Anthony and Alphonsus, who reconnected with their lost cousins in their search.
All of us feel very happy, very amazed that we can locate great-great-grandfather's grave. It's not every day that everybody had a chance like that. So we feel very privileged and grateful, especially to the Bukit Brown team for helping us find this. It's amazing.
Definitely.
And the fact that Chia Anxiang's this whole adventure brought all of us here together. We've never met all the cousins before, so to speak. So that in itself is a great blessing, I think.
Yes.
It's always the satisfaction when I manage to reunite the family with the ancestors. And this kind of satisfaction is what, it's a feeling, that you have done something worthwhile in life. And that's why I still keep on doing this kind of, doing on the research. Because there's so much, there's more than 100,000 tombs in Bukit Brown alone.
This discovery received wide media coverage. And the next thing we knew, there's this archivist from the Keng Teck Hui Association contacted us and mentioned that Chia Po Eng used to be a member of this Keng Teck Hui.
Chia Po Eng, the father of Chiang Xiang, was among a group of 36 young men from Malacca who came to seek business opportunities soon after the founding of Singapore. They swore eternal brotherhood and called their organization Keng Teck Hui. Over its 180-year history, some of the bloodlines of this brotherhood have been lost. Membership is strictly through the male line bearing the founders' surnames.
And so this guy, his name is Rooney, and then he asked me whether I could find a replacement for him. And I've been asking around, but unfortunately there seems to be more ladies Chia than men Chia, you see. And, but every one of them I ask, either they find themselves not suitable or they are just too busy. So, as I said earlier, right, hopefully I can extend my research and hopefully more Chia family can come forward and let us know that they are related to the Anxians, Anxia, and hopefully we can find a member to continue the lineage.
For Raymond, the search for more of Singapore's pioneers is relentless. Many of the tombs in Bukit Brown lie shrouded by dense vegetation. But there are gems to be uncovered.
Oh, yes. Wow, careful, careful. Wow. Teh Ho Sui.
Teh Ho Sui was a Singapore-born merchant who had businesses in timber, opium and shipping. Bukit Ho Sui was named after him. It started out as an unplanned township of about 20,000, living mainly in wooden squatters, until a major fire led to its redevelopment.
So in 1961, we know there's a big fire in the Bukit Ho Sui kampong there. And as such, the redevelopment took place. The government decided to build up the flats, housing flats. And it was during this redevelopment phase that they actually uncovered a very big coffin, 1 ton black coffin. And from there, when they opened up the coffin, when they asked somebody to come and open up the coffin, they found that actually it is the father of Teh Ho Sui.
Teh Ho Sui's father, Teh Han Long, was believed to be the first opium and spirit farmer in Singapore.
In fact, this hill in the past, according to the tombkeeper, was called Ho Sui Hill. Another Bukit Ho Sui. Anyway, because his father and him bought large tract of land, including here, it was believed that some of the land he might also have donated to the Hokkien Hui Kwan Cemetery.
Interestingly, Raymond's discovery did not just surface one tomb in Teh Ho Sui's name, but 2.
The historical record does not have the date of the death of Teh Ho Sui's wife, but we know Teh Ho Sui died in 1903. From the date here inscribed, there are 2 dates. One should be the date of death of his wife. The other one is 1899, which is built actually considered as a live tomb because it was built before the person died. Now, we know that Teh Ho Sui is actually buried in another tomb. So most likely for some feng shui reasons, this tomb is quite grand actually. You can see the very big shoulders and a very big arm extension. So most likely that Teh Ho Sui decided that to have another tomb of his own due to feng shui reasons. Yeah. So from the sons, from the children, we actually can confirm that this is actually the tomb of his wife and him, of course, but he is not buried here.
The search for more pioneers doesn't end as Raymond continues to cut through overgrown shrubbery for lost tombs and forgotten stories. Amidst all the greenery, Bukit Brown today is also a different kind of refuge and haven. For riders of the Singapore Polo Club, Bukit Brown is accessible from one of the side lanes off a hill. It was where Fiona Hammond learned to ride as a child.
I used to come out riding here as a kid with a whole group of other kids. Our riding instructor would bring the entire lesson out here. And we'd go galloping all over the place, down on the grass near the long drain, and we'd jump over some of the drains, and then we'd go up Gallop Hill. And it was called Gallop Hill because the horses like to gallop up it. And even before we'd get to the hill, the horses would know that they were going to be allowed to gallop up the hill, and they'd start prancing already before we got to the bottom of the hill. And as a kid, it looked really huge. And now it's like, oh, it's like a little hill. It looked like a mountain when you're 10 years old or 11 years old. People, when I tell them that I ride in a cemetery, they're a little bit shocked because they think, oh, it's creepy and scary, but I've never seen any ghosts. In fact, you see everything but ghosts. I think the gravestones are beautiful, and then, yeah, it's just nice to see the other aspects of nature. I've seen monkeys and monitor lizards and snakes, yep, seen a few cobras. And then, of course, you see people walking their dogs and stuff, so I guess we're not the only ones who feel this way about Bukit Brown.
As do many others, such as Peter Park, who aside from being a heritage blogger, is also an enthusiastic bird watcher.
I first started bird watching in Bukit Brown in 2008. It was an organized bird watching trip by Nature Society. I think Because of its proximity to the MacRitchie Reservoir, there's also a kind of a spillover effect of the forest birds that come over to forage or feed in Bukit Brown. The cemetery is closed since 1973, so this place has been left untouched for the past almost 40 years. The trees especially forest trees, are making a comeback. It's pretty good to have a balance between some of the tombs here where the descendants still come and visit, but also, in fact, sheltered by the forest trees that we have here. It's hard to experience Bukit Brown in text on the website or just looking at pictures of Bukit Brown. You should come down and experience it as a whole. As I'm talking to you, to the camera, I can hear birds, the calls of woodpeckers, of bulbuls around me, and it makes the whole experience much more personal.
Some part of it will have to go for development. As a result, descendants are going to exhume some of them, so we won't see them in the original state anymore. But well, we're always discovering new ones, so we kind of balance it out.
I think one of the really important things that Bukit Brown does for us is to make people realize that history is not just some unknown names or very distant and something that you can't relate to, but it's about real people, and some of whom we might even be related to. I mean, many people have found that they're related or they're descended from people who are buried at Bukit Brown, and because of this, started to understand more about not only their own family history, but about Singapore's history in general. So I think Bukit Brown really brings home that personal element of what history is about.
To me, even the unnamed, unmarked tombs represent someone who has contributed so much to the foundation of Singapore.
This is not something that just is significant to the descendants of the people who are interred or buried at Bukit Brown. This is something that the general public can enjoy. And it will be a pleasant place to visit, to take a walk around and to see how that heritage has extended itself in the Chinese diaspora.
Bukit Brown today has become more than a place where descendants fulfill their filial duties. As new memories are created from old tombstones, it has become a repository to uncover stories which adds a different dimension to the historical narrative of Singapore's development.